My first encounter with Douglas Turner Ward and the Negro Ensemble Company was during their last season at the St. Mark's Place down on Second Avenue. Um, at that time, they had open calls, and there were two lists, one for the equity members and one for non-equity. Of course, me and my roommate were non-equity, so we went down and we signed the non-equity list early in the morning and spent hours sitting on the curb at St. Mark's and Second Avenue, waiting for our turn, waiting anxiously for our turn for 5 minutes in the room with Douglas Turner Ward. So we waited, and she said to me, "You're going to these auditions in overalls and earth shoes?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is what theater is about, overalls and earth shoes and grit and sitting on the curb waiting to be seen." And I had come from the Caramoo House, which was one of the oldest theaters well, oldest Black theaters in the country. And a few people from the Caramoo House were working with the Negro Ensemble Company. So finally, by I think late afternoon, we were lined up on the stairs. They were beginning to see the non-equity people. And Douglas Turner Ward stepped out of the audition room, and he was standing at the top of the stairs. And of course, he's a big, commanding figure anyway, but he stood up there and looked down at us minions waiting to meet him, but he had on overalls. And I thought about it and I said, yes, I'm in the place I need to be because I had my overalls on and I was armed to go in. So when I went in, they did notice that I have worked at the Caramel House, which was great points for me. And they promised to call. They said, "Oh, yes, we're going to call you. We'll have a job for you as soon as the season starts." Well, I went back to Cleveland and I wasn't going to wait for them to call me. I called once a week for almost a year. And they were like, "No, not yet, not yet, not yet." But finally, I went back to work at the Caramel House for that year, and I was sitting in a establishment talking to a friend of my father's, and he said to me, I'm a young person. He said, "Well, what do you want to do with your life? What is it that you want to do?" I said, "Listen, I'm out of here. I'm going to New York. I'm just here. This is a pit stop, and I'm out." So he said, "Well, let me tell you something. If you're sitting here next year this time, you'll never leave." Well, that put some fire into my heart. And I started applying to graduate schools and applied to Columbia and NYU and Brooklyn College. They all had theater management and directing programs. So I got into all three actually, but I picked Columbia. And just as I arrived for school, the NEC called. And I cleaned out the box office at Theater 4 on 55th Street. That was the first season there. And it was a wonderful start to a great career. I think I had several conversations with Doug over the years, of course, some better than others. Some of them were be quiet in the box office, we could hear you in the theater. Some of them were when he came to the lobby early from break and was hanging out in the lobby, and I was in the box office. Some of them were when we worked together, but I would think one of the ones that really sticks in my brain, uh, well, there's probably two, but one that sticks out in my brain was the Amsterdam News had come to do an article on the Negro Ensemble Company after I had started directing and doing some more administrative work there. Um, they had made a lot of mistakes. There was, they said Theater 4 was on 54th Street. And I mean, it was just, I hate to say it, but it was just bad reporting. So when I was looking at the article, and in fact, even the three people that were in the photo were, the names were misspelled or misnoted. He said to me, you have to correct this. You can't allow this to stay in print without you at least writing a correction. And I said, "Well, what's so important about it? It's just the Amsterdam News." I said, it's not like it's the New York Times got it wrong, right? And he stopped me and he said, "No, everything that goes in print about this company is important. It's going to be history. It's going to be record. Later on, someone's going to look at this article and say, well, was Theater 4 on 54th Street or on 55th Street? Here, this article says this, and that one says that." And at that time in my career, I'm busy trying to be a director and, running things. And I didn't understand really the importance of it. Now, after becoming a scholar and really searching and researching and looking for records and looking for correct information, I realized how important that was, because he was a journalist really. Before he started doing theater, he was always a writer, but he worked in journalism and he understood the importance of that record, and he was trying to pass that on to me. I remember that as a real important moment, as not just an artist, but as a person and a Black person in this country. And when I teach African American theater, I am teaching my students to dig for that information, dig beyond the first three Google searches, find out what was the real story. And he used to read all the papers. He used to read all the newspapers, the Daily News Post, the Times, the Amsterdam News, the one from Queens. He will come in with all the papers because he said you have to get the full story and you can't get it from one source. So I think that's really one of the most important lessons that I learned from him, other than standing in the back of the theater, watching him direct, watching him work with the actors, watching him sit in the chair and move all around the theater, looking at the different perspectives of the play as the actors did it, listening to how he gave notes. I thought that was so important because he didn't, as a director, uh, talk a lot. But sometimes, and one of the things about the ensemble that he worked with, they could understand his grunts. They knew, if he said, well, yeah, when you came to that, they knew what he was talking about. And as you listen to him, you could see what he was saying, and I got the benefit of that. I mean, I watched a lot of rehearsals in Theater 4, and I think my directing really was informed and inspired by that. Well, my first impression was that figure at the top of the stairs in those overalls, and it was instant fear. Okay, because he was a man of few words. You weren't really sure what was on his mind, if he wanted to talk or not. He wasn't one of those kind of people you could really read immediately. Um, After I started working at the NEC, I realized that he was a, a contemplative person. He seemed to always be thinking about the next move, about the next place, about the next play, about the next rehearsal. He wasn't, he had a nice laugh, and he hung out when we went to the bars in the neighborhood after rehearsal. But you didn't really, at least I didn't, I will say, really know what was on his mind, especially when I first started working there. I know he watched everything, and he was watching us in the box office as much as he was watching us, the actors in rehearsal. He'd come in and ask about what's the audience like tonight? Where are they sitting? Who's here tonight? Well, let me see the press list. Those kinds of things. How many subscribers do we have tonight? He was cognizant of all of those things, a whole kind of realm of running that theater. And a lot of people think he was just the artistic side, but he paid a lot of attention to what was going on in other areas too. So as I got older and grew in the business and as an artist, we had other conversations. We talked about developing new scripts. He showed me the script that Charles Fuller brought him for Zoom and the Sign, and the kind of work that they collaboratively did. Some of the characters were men when it started, and they changed to women because of the need of the script. Um, he talked about working with artists and how some people you can give notes to in one fashion, and other people you can't. you know, you have to kind of massage them into it. Um, we talked about the business and the industry and uh, how sometimes, not sometimes, most times, when we were writing grant proposals, um, how he felt they were going to be received. He came in one day and he says, you guys sitting here writing these grant proposals, and I feel so bad because I know they're not going to get funded. And I said, oh, thanks, Doug. We really appreciate that. He said, no, but even if you do get money, you're not going to get the kind of money that Joe Papp is getting downtown. And that was one of the things that was kind of a, a thorn in his side, because he had to watch not only his generation, but our generation. Now we're in a second, almost third generation of people running that company, still being told no and still being pushed away because we weren't kind of and he wasn't the kind of get along kind of person. He wasn't going to compromise the artistic ideas and visions of the company to get money. And I wrote an article about his relationship with the Ford Foundation. And as many of you know, the Ford Foundation was the foundation that started funding the Negro Ensemble Company at its inception. And by the 70s and 80s, that relationship had really deteriorated, because he didn't want to change the programming to suit the grants. His thing was fund what I do, fund who this company is. And one of the beautiful things that Gerald Crone says about him, Doug understood what this company was for artists and audiences. And it wasn't Broadway. Certainly, ceremonies could move to Broadway. River Niger did move to Broadway, but they moved without the Negro Ensemble Company, and many people did not understand what that was. Why did you make that decision? What could be better than going to Broadway? you know, but we can see now from August, we know what there is something better. There's autonomy. There's the control of your artistic journey and your vision, and for all the generations who've come after. Because certainly from his first view of the Negro Ensemble Company to the generations that have come through there is way more than any Broadway play would have ever accomplished. And that's what he understood. He understood that this company was not about money. We used to call it never enough cash. And uh, it wasn't about fame, it was about the work. And one of the things that I think is so important is that, especially during that time at Theater 4, most of us, in fact, I don't know anybody who worked there full time, had to wait tables. We didn't have to do temp jobs. We could pay our rent and come to work every day at the Negro Ensemble Company and do our art. And that was such a beautiful time. I mean, I think that's something that kind of interlocks us together even today, because that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen a lot even today, especially not today. But that's what his goal was for the company. Uh, I don't think I realized the importance of the Negro Ensemble Company um, at the time when I was experiencing it the most. Um, I think I realized that we were fortunate, and people talked about us all the time being a clique and that kind of thing. Because once you got your foot in the door, you really didn't want to let that space go. And you might go where, I did some other work on the side, like with Richard Allen Center and some other companies, but um, they always knew that the Negro Ensemble Company was our home. When we were the, if you worked in the box office, designing, in the office, the house management, whatever, when they called, you came. And I think it was because there was not only that uh, familiarity, and everybody knew that you knew how to do what you did, and they did demand a high quality. We spent lots of nights in that theater all night long because missing deadlines and things like that was not an option. We were run like a Broadway show. The stage managers and the, even though we were on a Lord contract here in New York, um, we we were run like a very professional theater company. And even the people who came to visit us from the Broadway shows, I think my friend that I was talking about went to the audition. She was doing Dreamgirls at the time, and we meet them because we did the same schedule. So sometimes we meet in between the matinee and the evening shows. They wanted to come hang out with us because yes, they were making way more money than we were, but we had the most fun. We were, we were have had a creative, artistic family that, you know, spanned from Adolph Caesar and Francis Foster and Graham Brown, you know, down to me because I was one of the youngest of that crew, and Lisa Watson and Janice Lane and some of the other people who were in our age bracket. And it was a wonderful exchange of the veteran teaches the neophyte, and, you know, don't drink too much tonight because you got 5 shows this weekend, you know, and the off the it spanned the gamut. So I don't I don't know if uh, I realized that at the time. I don't know if I realized the value of this whole ensemble because it was an ensemble from the people who worked in the office to the people who worked in the theater. We all understood the importance of our positions and our spots in the spectrum. But I'm not sure until much later did I recognize the value of that. I would say to the next generation, and I do all the time, control your work. And especially now, we've come back from this pandemic almost. I'm hoping we've come back from it. We see how fragile these systems are. I mean, who would ever have thought that Broadway would close down for a year? And all of those people who were employed there, not just the actors, but the crew and the box office and the restaurants in the area. And you see how that has reverberated. But in the midst of that, in the midst of this pandemic, we must continue to create despite all. And I think that's the real important lesson that I learned working at the Negro Ensemble Company, because there were times, certainly, when we had, you know, great funding. And then there were times when there was, how do we make the payroll this week? You know, hurry up and get those box office checks from TDF into the bank so the paychecks from last week don't bounce. Okay. So it, it, it again, it wasn't about the money, you know, and I know there's a lot of critique about that. It wasn't about the money, but it was about autonomy and then being responsible once you take on that challenge. If you want to say what plays you're going to produce and what playwrights you're going to support and what actors you're going to hire and what administrators are going to work, then you have to take the responsibility for that. And that's what I say to my actors and young people that I teach. Um, it's important for you to take responsibility for your art. You know, coming to New York and doing cattle calls and going to LA and whatever you do in LA to get a job, I'm not sure. Uh, it's that's not the route anymore. You know, unfortunately, because then it opens you up for what is on your brain as an artist. What is your vision for the next century? Because many of you will still be here then. So it's important, I think, that you take that look of being responsible and then being disciplined. That's one thing that I will say that we did learn at the NEC. If you weren't disciplined, you were out the door. Because if you don't get to work on time, if that box office didn't open at 1 o'clock, whenever time it was supposed to, somebody was standing there watching and knew it. I used to run down 55th Street from the train at 59th Street because it was important to us that we presented that. If someone called the box office and no one answered, that doesn't look good. It's not professional. When the actors came in a half hour, that hallway was clear. They were upstairs getting ready to perform. The designers had deadlines they had to make, and they stayed in there all night long making those deadlines, meeting those things. And that's where the responsibility comes. And I've even seen at times when Douglas Turner Ward would dig in his pocket and give somebody $200 to go buy some props because they didn't come in on time or something like that. So it went the whole gamut. And that's the most important thing I think I would share with the next generation. I don't know what that's going to look like. I can't tell you, but I think that's really the important part. If Douglas Turner Ward was sitting here right now, I would like to tell him thank you because he gave a lifetime to this industry and to this company and to demonstrating what pure artistry is about. Um, there were no shorts when it came to him. And when he felt like there were shorts being served to him, he walked away. He wasn't willing to take those shorts. And those are decisions that we all make. But I think I would tell him thank you. And thank you for not just showing us what dedication and artistry is about, but also showing us what collaboration is about. Because it was wonderful. And I don't think I've had this opportunity since then to really work with such talented, dedicated Black, all Black artists. Now, certainly Jerry Crone was one of the founders, and he was there when I started. But it was clear that he even understood what Doug's position was on that. He wanted to create a place where Black people could do theater and could do good theater, bad theater, but it was always well done theater. You might not have liked the play, but you couldn't say it wasn't well done and it didn't start on time. Okay. But I would tell him thank you. And I think for a lifetime of example of how to um, work in this business, in this industry.